have seen the dark heart of tone. I have wandered through the jungles of gear forums and boutique pedal boards like some half-mad pilgrim chasing the echo of a sound that maybe never even existed. I have watched men, good men, lose themselves to it, obsessing over cables like relics, swapping speakers like alchemists searching for gold, trading time, money, even music itself for the next magic box, the next secret setting, the next thing that might finally fill that hollow space in their playing. I've seen their faces in guitar shops, tight, desperate smiles stretched over empty eyes. I've watched them scroll endlessly late at night, hypnotized by demo videos promising salvation for $2.99. I've seen them build pedal boards like shrines, only to tear them apart days later. And in the end, the great and terrible truth is this: tone does not care if you find it. Tone is wild. Tone is feral. And sometimes the very act of chasing it will strip you of the thing that mattered most, your voice. Tone nobody talks about, but everyone remembers. You spend years chasing the perfect tone, but the tone you remember, the one that changed you, it probably wasn't perfect at all. Think of the raw, iconic tones. Neil Young's angry tone, his angry fuzz, and I believe that is a Tweed Deluxe. Let me know if I'm right in the comments. Kurt Cobain's brittle roar. The Kinks' ripped speaker fuzz. Jack White and his primitive mayhem. Malcolm Young and his dry, biting growl. Here's the deal. There is the lie of perfect tone. We are obsessed today with amps, pedals, plugins, gear hoarding. You know, it doesn't matter if you're one of the old school guys, the amp only guys, or the modern guys that are using plugins or modelers or different things, man. You know what? Everyone is obsessed with tone, and everyone thinks their path is the only right path. But think about those guys that I just mentioned previously. I don't think anybody would have listened to those tones by themselves and thought, oh man, that's an amazing guitar tone. They were amazing tones because they were the right tones for the song. And I've said this multiple times on many videos. Sometimes the perfect tone is not the right tone for the song. I talked about this before. I recorded in a Nashville studio off of Music Row a track for a country singer from, I think he's from Kentucky, named Marty Brown, right? And they said, we want you to play this guitar through this amp and just play a solo. And I immediately looked at the guitar, and it was a lowly Mexican Strat, one of the early days of the Mexican Strat. So, I think those guitars have come a long way, but this was just a basic, $3.99 at the time. I think those were maybe even $2.99 back then. And this was probably, this was probably about 1997, 1998. And I immediately looked at the guitar and goes, oh, well, I got my guitar upstairs. Why don't I just bring that down? And I plugged my guitar in, and it sounded too nice. It sounded too polished. It sounded too perfect. And I had briefly tried the guitar they wanted me to play through this little like Fender solid state amp. And I thought, I'll go get my guitar. Then when I listened to the track, and it was a raucous, honky-tonk style track, and I realized, man, this guitar sounds too perfect. This guitar doesn't sound like what the song sounds like. And I put my ego aside and I said, you know what? You guys were right. It's this guitar through this amp. And I picked up that Mexican Strat, plugged it straight into this solid state amp that had a gain knob, turned the gain up, turned the volume up, and I let it fly. And that was the solo that made it on that record. Now, this was a long time ago. I've searched to try to find that track, but it was an indie record, and I don't think you can find it out there. But man, it's an important lesson that I learned that day. You know what? There is no such thing as a perfect tone, only the perfect tone for a song, only the perfect tone for the situation that you're in. And sometimes it's just the perfect tone that you can get out of the gear you have at hand. Flying into a random town and being given a backline amp that maybe has been rode hard and put up wet for years. Those old Fender Twins, people used for decades out on the road. That was the standard backline amp for many decades, was a Fender Twin Reverb. Those amps got worked for years. Probably never saw a amp repair bench. They would just slap tubes in it and push it out there, the next week if the tubes went down. And you know what? You had to learn to get a tone that worked. You had to learn how to dial in a tone super quick and get out there, do your job, get your paycheck, and fly to the next town. And that's the reality of it. Was it perfect tone? It was the perfect tone I could get that day. It was the tone that I could live with, or it was the perfect tone for the song that you're recording. Everyone tweaks endlessly for perfection. But man, when you're on a session, you've got to be able to reach down, make very quick adjustments, and roll with it. Same thing when you're at a sound check. They're not going to give you hours to dial your tone in. You're going to have to dial it in very quickly. Hope that if you're using your own gear, that shouldn't be a problem. But hopefully, if you've got backline, you can get it dialed in quick and go. Because you know what? Nobody has time for perfection. You think the sound guy's going to sit there while you're tweaking this and pulling this pedal out and doing all that? No, he wants you to come in, play for a few moments, few moments and he's on next to the bass player. He's on next to the drummer. He's got a whole band to mix. He doesn't have time to fool with you and your endless tweaking. But ask any player and the tones burned in their memory are dangerous, weird, imperfect. I can think of the backwards guitar solo on the song Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix. And that tone is raw. It is pure. It is the perfect guitar solo, but could you say that's the perfect guitar tone? Maybe by itself it's not, but it is perfectly imperfect. Now here's the reality. Nobody walks around humming the EQ curve of a Kemper preset. What people remember is feel, impact, imperfection, emotion. Stop over polishing your tone. Stop over polishing your tracks. Start capturing emotion. Start capturing feel. Be okay with imperfection. Make sure that you capture maximum emotional impact. Think about that. Instead of obsessing over the grid, obsess over your performance and how much emotion you can put into a track. People can feel it. Man, the world is clamoring for real. The world is clamoring for music with feel, with music that has impact, that keeps the imperfection and makes it perfectly imperfect. Give them raw emotion. Now, recently, I had talked about going into a guitar shop and hearing two guys and they're playing through a killer rig and it sounded like two cats fighting in a burlap sack. And man, that was not a good tone. And I'm not sure that there is a song that would be the perfect tone for. But you know what? The gear was flawless. The problem was the playing. And that is the lesson that you can learn from that, man. You know what? We can all work on our technique. We can all work on, the way that we strike a note, the way that we use our vibrato, and slowing down and getting the true emotional impact and making sure each note is the right note for that moment in time. Tone without voice is nothing. So here's the deal, man. Would there be a time when the guitar solo needs to sound like two cats fighting in a burlap sack? I'm not sure. But you know what? I wouldn't negate that in thinking that, you know what? Sometimes a producer will ask you to give me something that sounds old and broken. Sometimes going for that fuzzed out, manic, crazy, octave jumping tone, sometimes that is the perfect sound. And you have to realize when to put your ego aside and how this perfect tone, swimming in reverb and swimming in delay, man, sometimes you got to just strip it down to the basics. Take all that mayonnaise, take all that mustard, take all that gravy off of your tone and give them the real and the raw. Sometimes that is the perfect tone. And sometimes that is exactly what lasts. The tone that nobody talks about. It's the tone that leaves scars, that sticks in your teeth like a bad dream, that makes you feel something even when it's wrong. That is what lasts. Perfection, it'll only, last as long as somebody wants to listen to it. Do people want to always listen to somebody playing chops all the time? As great as some of the technical progenitors of guitar today are, and there are amazing players, how often do you want to listen to somebody and feel insignificant? How often does somebody want to listen to something and feel like, well, I'll never be able to do that? So all of you players out there that maybe don't have the most chops, that maybe don't have, the ability of all these people that are just shredding up and down the Instagram, shredding up and down the social media. All you players out there that don't have that ability, write great songs. Figure out the perfect tone for your song. And all of that playing, all of that flash, all of that stuff will be completely negated. Don't let anybody discourage you from playing, from practicing, and finding your sound. It's one of the most important things you can find. And if you write one great song, it's going to negate all of those guys, because I haven't heard any of them. I haven't heard any of the people that are able to run up and down the neck. I haven't heard them write one good song. So think about that. Now, here's the deal. The real secret of all of this: don't chase perfection, chase truth, chase danger. Chase the thing that sounds like you. Only you can sound like you. And you know what? It doesn't matter if it's ugly. It doesn't matter if it's raw. It doesn't matter if it's imperfect. It is perfectly imperfect, and it is just like you. Perfect tone is forgettable. Dangerous tone is forever.